Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and today we are going to be making these beautiful paper mache hand planters. Before we get into the video, I'd like to share a few art history resources that helped me develop this lesson plan. Maria Martinez was one of the most well-known Native American potters in the 20th century. She combined images of animals and other figurative elements such as rain clouds, bird feathers, rows of planted corn, and imagery of the water flowing in the river. Originally, Native Americans used ceramic pieces for food storage, cooking, and ceremonies. Once these became less utilitarian objects, she started selling them as decorative pieces. Another Native American artist is Grace Medicine Flower. When it comes to ceramics, she's very innovative and influential to different potters all over the world. Her vases combine butterflies and hummingbirds, which are intended to remind the viewer of our delicate relationship with nature. She started her career by creating small, round seed pods with animal designs. She is now creating larger bowls with engraved sections with very small designs. She grew up learning clay from her family and worked closely with her brother. She uses a sgraffito technique in most of her pieces, and it can be seen on her artwork displaying imagery of animals and other nature scenes. In some of these videos, I am speaking because I didn't decide to do a voiceover until after, so hopefully it doesn't get confusing. The first step in making these paper mache hand planters is making the paper mache. To start, I mixed about a cup of flour with about half a cup of water. I kept adding the water as I mixed it up to see the consistency. I'm going for about a yogurt texture. As you can see, I add a little bit more water because mine was very thick. You just want to keep mixing until you get the right texture. If you end up adding too much water, you can also go back and add more flour. I am now cutting up my paper. I had some packing paper that I decided to use, but you can also use newspaper or other things such as computer paper or construction paper if that's all that you have in your house. I cut it into about 4-inch strips. Having a range of small and large pieces is great because then you have different pieces to work with. I also cut up enough to use for the whole project so that way my scissors didn't get all sticky once I started paper macheing. As you can see, cutting up the strips, they don't have to be perfect, it just has to be what you prefer, whether that be smaller shapes or larger shapes. As you can see, I cut up some newspaper as well, and I ended up using this for the inside of my bowl, but you can use whatever paper you prefer. For the next step, you're going to want a piece of cardboard, and this can be a big box or a small box as you can see to my left. In case you don't have cardboard at home, you can also use other paper materials such as a paper bowl. I moved on to creating the box. For the structure of the bowl, I cut about 3 inches on both sides using the bottom of the box and the side. You can cut it however you like. You can use the whole bottom or the top. I just felt like it was easier and more structured this way. I folded it and bent it a little bit to try and get that circular shape, and then I cut out little slots in the bottom so that once I folded it in a circle, the bottom had a little bit of support. You can use a little bit of tape if you'd like, but I decided to just wait until paper macheing and paper mache it shut. All the materials I'm using are safe and eco-friendly to be left outside, and I didn't want to use plastic tape because I didn't want it to be within the environment if I left my bowls outside. So here's the final product after I finish cutting the cardboard. And now we are going to move on to our next step, which is paper macheing. Now I take my paper mache mixture out and I add a little bit of salt. This helps prevent mold growing when your planter gets moist. In the next part, I just talk about how I'm going to cover the full base and start with the side that isn't connected yet. Now you can see I start paper macheing. I take one strip of paper and rub off all the excess and wrap around that spot where my bowl meets. Once I get this spot pretty secure, I end up moving on to covering the inside, and then I start with the bottom. I think getting the bottom pretty well paper mache is important because it's the base of everything and it'll hold a little bit better once you start putting your fingers on because these are going to be a little bit heavy when you have it wet. As you can see, I just keep paper macheing. As I do the bottom, I covered the sides a little bit to make sure it was a little bit easier once I moved on to the top. I elevated my bowl a little bit by placing it on top of another bowl. I decided to cut out rectangles with 3 slits in them to make the 4 fingers and place those on so that I had a little bit of guidance when making my fingers. This just helps me map out making sure that all 4 fingers would fit on the side. I didn't include the thumb yet because the thumb is set back from the fingers a little bit, and I decided that I wanted my thumbs to overlap the tops of the bowls. I end up cutting another one so that I have one for the other side as well. These don't have to be perfect and they don't have to be completely identical. You will be adding paper mache over them and covering them up so people will not see these, and it is not a big deal if they do. As you can see, I add paper mache to both sides and just paper mache them on. They don't completely stay, so you just have to keep working with the paper mache and making sure that it holds it down. I pretty much started with covering the outside of the hand and then working my way around the fingers. I just continue layering different pieces until I get a thick enough shape for the fingers. Kind of go one by one, but then I also go back and touch up different spots where I notice that it's not really working or I need more. When you're building these, using your own hands as reference is going to be the closest thing to making these look very realistic. As you can see, I look at my fingers pretty often and compare the size. Obviously, your piece does not have to be the same size as your hands, but luckily for mine, it was close. I decided to record myself from this angle just so you can see a little bit of my process and how I just continue on to layer the paper mache and just work my way around the bowl. At this point, I am doing the back of the hand. I layered a bunch of paper mache. This just saves a little bit of time when it comes to paper macheing something that's really thick. If you have paper mache before and you understand how it works, you can skip over this part if you'd like. It's just me paper macheing and getting the form for the fingers correct. I just keep building up the paper mache until I feel satisfied with the size and the depth of the fingers. I then moved on to the back and covered it so that the slit where the bowl met each other is really secure and doesn't have any issues with structure since the fingers and the hands are so heavy on the front. I just wanted the back to be a little bit thicker to support the weight. As you can see, I keep layering up my fingers. I like to make them a bit thicker so that they stand out from the bowl and so that you can really tell that they are fingers. This process is quite tedious, so you can take as long or as little as you want to really define the fingers. Mine took about an hour to do, but you can definitely do this in less. Once I finish the outside, I move on to paper macheing the inside. I ended up running out of the packing paper that I was using, so I decided to use the newspaper that I had cut up so that I didn't waste any materials. As you can see, I just use the paper mache as I've been doing and really make sure that the inside of the bowl is covered and that there are no holes in it, because once we plant seeds in here, we want to make sure that we can water our plant and not have it leak, and make sure that the plant is safe and secure in the planter. I then set aside my paper mache bowl and waited about 24 hours for it to dry. I took my leftover paper mache that I placed in the fridge and added some food coloring to it. I used teal, but you can use really whatever color you like. I did 2 layers to make sure that you couldn't see the brown paper through it. And then the next day, I moved on to the second planter that I had made, and I used a bunch of tissue paper. I cut up old scraps that my mom had. I chose these colors, but you can certainly choose whatever colors you prefer. As you can see, I continue on painting on the paper mache and then adding the color pieces where I want them. I decided eventually that it was a lot easier to paint a good portion of the bowl and then take little pieces of tissue paper and stick them where I wanted them so that I could visualize where the colors would be and where they would overlap. As you can see, I'm doing it right now. It just gave a little bit of perspective to where the colors were going to be and how it was going to look once it was finished. Some pieces will get overlapped and they'll fold over as you're paper macheing, and that's okay because you can just keep going back with tissue paper and adding it where you want it. I decided that I really liked the way that the blue showed through the pink underneath, so I ended up covering a lot of the pink spots with the blue. And I just keep making sure that everything is flat to the bowl so that no pieces are hanging off. This process I found works best with a paintbrush. I happen to have paintbrushes, but if you don't have paintbrushes, you could try different materials. I did try a sponge. It didn't work the best, but it did work a little bit for this process. Line the fingers with a little bit of black paint. I used a really thin paintbrush and just went along those creases. I decided to add some details where the knuckles were and the thumb, and then I also decided to take a little bit of red paint and paint the fingernails. I thought that this would just add a little bit of detail to my bowl. I decided to do the black to the other bowl as well once it dried. The reason why I decided on hands is because I wanted to show our direct relationship with nature. In our hands, we hold such a close influence from our surroundings. Humans have a responsibility to take care of other life. This could be feeding an animal, planting a garden, or picking up trash from the beach. Each day, we can make a positive impact on not only nature, but our surroundings. Our relationship with the things around us start from a physical act. I hope you enjoy making these bowls, and remember, every day you can make a difference.